If you'd like to customize a wooden hammer handle like this, just continue watching. Before we get started, we got a couple of issues we need to deal with. Number one is, even though the hammer really lays nice and flat on the table, the first thing is that I really don't like the idea of having this metal hammer sliding back and forth around the table while I'm trying to maneuver it and cut it. Number one, I don't like the sound, and number two is just I don't want the metal on my table. The second thing is actually once you get out here to the end, and you can actually scroll up almost to the end of this hammer, the handle is no longer this is no longer supported on your table, so it's going to rotate on you, so you're going to have issues at that point. So what we're going to need to do is to make a jig that will hold the hammer in place, that will allow to keep this metal on metal contact from happening, and it'll also support the hammer handle or the hammer itself all the way out once we get to the end. If we're going to scroll out, I would say within a ½ inch of this end. So let's get the jig made, and I'll show you how I did it. Okay, now what I'm going to use here is I've just chosen a piece of 1/8 inch tempered hardboard. Anything 1/8 inch material or even a 1/4 inch will work for this. This is approximately 14 inches long by 9 inches wide. This is just temper hardboard that you can get from the big box store. And what I'm going to do is just lay my hammer approximately in the center and bring this end right to the edge of your material. I'm just going to take a marker and I'm just going to trace the image of my hammer. This is mostly for reference on this end down here, but trace along the edge. We'll come down, trace along the edge. We have the rough basic outline of the hammer. Now I've already marked off. What you're going to want to do is you want to mark off the point. You know, on this particular hammer, there's a little taper right here. So I'm marking off about where that taper is. And then I want to mark off about 1 inch back up the handle. So there'll be support down here on this end. And you don't want to really get in any closer to 1 inch, ½ inch or so at the end of this handle. You want to kind of, what I usually do is, since this taper, I'll measure off the distance of this taper. Then I'll measure off back here on the end of this handle so it will be even. And then that's my cutting area between those 2 points. So I have this marked off about where the taper's at, and then about the end where I want. So now I'm going to take this to the scroll saw, and I'm just going to cut this section out right here on the scroll saw. Now that we have the hole cut for the hammer, we're going to need to add some blocks in here to stabilize the hammer while we cut it. I'm going to place the hammer back in the position. Now I've chosen, these are 3/4 of an inch. Since I'm using an 1/8 inch bottom material, I'm going to add some more strength to it by adding longer blocks. If you were using, let's say, 1/4 inch or 3/8, you wouldn't have to have the long blocks. You could just use smaller blocks in here. We're going to add some long blocks on the side to help stabilize this. And one across the front. And then probably one on each side like so. So let's get these glued down so that they can dry. And then we can start cutting the hammer. one note, if you do happen to use, I've purchased several of these hammers for use so with this one jig. If you do happen to change hammers, you may have to make another jig to accept that hammer. There may be enough differences. This is not a universal jig that's going to fit every hammer. Now I'm going to let this dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to add some clamps. I want it to sit just long enough to make sure it doesn't shift, and then I'm going to add some clamps to add some pressure to it. And now this has had a chance to sit for a few minutes. I wanted it to sit to make sure that the glue kind of set so that it wouldn't move around. I'm going to add my homemade universal clamping system. Just going to take some weights that I've had that I use specifically for this kind of purpose. And add them. Now I'm just going to sit for a couple of 3 hours and let it dry. Now that the glue has had time enough to dry, I've removed the weights. I forgot to mention, just in case anybody is interested, these blocks on the bottom are pretty much 3/4 of an inch thick. This one is 1.5 inches by 10.5 inches. This one's 1.5 inches by 11.5 inches. This one is 1.5 inches by 4, 1.5 inches by 3, 1.5 inches by 5. I will put a PDF file which will show the size of the backer of the jig, and then all the size of the blocks, just in case anybody wants information so that they can build their own jig. Just remember that not all hammers may be the same size, so you may have to make some adjustments. Also, I have added a couple more, actually 4 more blocks here. This is about 3/8 of an inch, 1.5 inches by 4. Same with this. This is 1.5 inches by 3, about 3/8 of an inch. You're going to have to play with the thickness of this. I did this by sanding it to make it thicker. And then I added a couple of blocks here. They're 1.5 inches, probably by 1 inch, and probably not 3/8 of an inch, a little bit less than 3/8 of an inch. The reason I added these blocks is because what I'm going to want to do, since I'm a bottom feeder and I'm going to want to turn this thing on its side, I don't want the hammer falling out. I'm going to end up taking these. I've just using the same type of hardboard that I used for the back. I'm going to end up taking these and laying these across and adding screws to put pressure on the hammer to hold it down so that it will not move when I turn it up on its side to get the blade in. If you're a top feeder, you may not want to add these, or I just want to make sure that the hammer doesn't move. So I'll be adding those. But before I do that, we're going to need to add the pattern. So let me talk about the pattern just for a second. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but I have added marks. I've already measured out where the pattern is going to go. If it's a short pattern, I'll try to center it inside the handle. You may opt to put it on the end. That's fine, whichever way you want to do. But I pretty much cut my pattern down to size so that it fits nice and neat when I go to glue it on the handle. Now this I've used, I believe it's pronounced Eros Bold ITC, and this is about a 78 point size for the font. I'm just going to glue this down with the 3M45. I have sanded the handle. I plan on putting some more finish on after I do, but I have sanded the handle so that this will bond a little bit better. But you can put it on the end. Like I said, I like centering mine. Another thing, the hammer seems to be tapered from about 3/4 of an inch on this particular one up to about 1 inch. So I've actually adjusted the pattern for that too. It starts out a little narrow and ends up a little wider. I think that looks kind of neat when you do it. So it's just one of those things you can add to. I just thought I would bring that up. So let's see about first sticking the pattern down, and then we're going to take it out and bore some holes in it. I sprayed the glue on my pattern. Like I said, I put marks in the center of the hammer to help me align this. Now it's just a matter of me getting it centered this way. Making sure the pattern sticks really well. So I've got it centered this way, lengthwise of the hammer, and also I tried to center it on top of the hammer. Okay, one thing I would like to point out when we're going to drill these holes is make sure that you can use the largest drill bit that you can use when you're going to drill on the font. This is pretty thick ash. You're going to need a pretty long drill bit, and the smaller ones will break on you trying to drill through this. Over a period of time of doing these, I broke a few bits. So the largest bit that you can use to get in here to drill these holes. And also you want to drill the holes at the top of the oval. If you try to go here and drill down on the side, your drill bit is going to have a tendency to want to slide down the side and mess up your handle and your pattern. So drill at the top, at the crest of the oval up here, down the whole way. Do not go on one side or the other. Now let's attach these pieces to hold the hammer down. And it's pretty secure. It's not really going to go anywhere. One note is when you're using plywood, it's a little bit more flexible than this hardy board. If you get these, if you're using this hardboard and you get these blocks too low, when this tries to go across, this hardboard will actually break. If you're using plywood, it's a little bit more forgiving. A couple of times you do this, you're probably going to break a couple of blades. I'm using a number 3 Flying Dutchman scroll reverse. Second tip is I usually don't do the spin technique, as it said, especially like this is a W, for instance. When I come to this end, I'm going to use the gnawing out technique, or just come down and around and go back up, because this ash will, especially in little tiny letters, will break fairly easy, so you have to be very careful of that and very aware of that. One more point to point out, since this is oval, and you're going to be starting in the middle, as you start to come to the outside of these letters, they naturally are going to go down the side of the oval. Therefore, the wood will actually be thinner out here on the end of this letter than it is up here in the center of the letter. So as you're coming down, you're going to notice that it's going to start, the cutting is going to start getting faster. You need to be prepared for that and expect that, so that you won't overshoot the end of the letter and get going so fast. Because it's getting easier, you might have a tendency to push a little faster because you're cutting faster. So just be aware as you're coming down the side of this to and it starts getting faster, to slow down even more so you don't overrun the end of your letter. Those are just a few things that I've learned that has made it a lot easier for me to cut these. So all I can say, let's get started and get her done. haven't figured it out by now, this hammer is for Charles Deering. This is his shop, Wooden Visions. So hopefully I'll get it to you and get it shipped to you in the next few days, Charles. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. I hope that you were able to take something from this today and be able to use it and make your own customized hammer handle. If you would, subscribe to me here on YouTube, like me on Facebook, and also visit my webpage, simplywoodencreations.com. Thank you again. God bless. And keep the blade on the line.